This is Bolus Maximus. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Matt. Thanks for tuning in.
This is my first time hosting a podcast. How about you?
Yeah, for sure. Any idea how we're supposed to get people to listen and subscribe to this podcast?
Just by saying it?
Subscribe.
You're tuned in to Bolus Maximus with Brandon and Matt. Don't forget to comment, share, and smash that like button to stay up to date.
Hey, welcome back to the Bolus Maximus podcast. My name is Matt Taro. I'm here with my co-founder and co-host Brandon A. Denson.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, Mr. Denson? We're joined today by Dalyce Wilson and her father, Howard. Hello, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having us.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon to talk a little bit about the caregiver perspective and kind of just, you know, what that looks like from now a grown child. She's an adult, Dalyce, and as we've had some conversations with her, she was very nice to offer up this time. So thanks so much for joining us. And it sounds like you're joining us from Maryland over there on the East Coast, but Dalyce was born here on the West Coast. So kind of back and forth. What do you like better, the East Coast or the West Coast? You can tell us and be honest.
West Coast, best coast.
Howard, how about you? You like the West Coast when you lived here?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The Mediterranean climate, it was just to die for.
It's hard to beat. So, yeah, we'll jump right into it and kind of talk about, your time as a caregiver here for Dalyce. So she was diagnosed. You were diagnosed at 7. So were you diagnosed in Los Angeles or after you had moved back? Were you in LA?
It was after I had moved back. So I was on the East Coast. I turned 6 out here, and then I turned 7. After I turned 7, I got a flu vaccine, got the flu, got diabetes. So that was kind of my situation. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, we've heard a lot of patients having experiences where there was something else going on medically alongside of a diagnosis. So from the parents' perspective, Howard, how did that come? How did you understand, or was it because you were already going to the hospital with your daughter and they said something, or did somebody notice that something was going on? How did you figure out that she was living with this disease or would start living with this disease?
So, and I hope you don't mind me talking about the detail, the nitty gritty. So Dalyce at 7 was wetting the bed on a more frequent basis than we as parents felt she should be. I mean, her brother wasn't doing that, and we couldn't understand what that was all about. She was always thirsty, and so we didn't have any sense of what the problem was. Her mom took her to the pediatrician because of the bedwetting and what have you, to see, if this might be a urinary issue, urinary tract infection or something like that. And they just happened to take her blood and do check her glucose level. And they told my ex-wife to take her immediately to the hospital. She didn't even register on the meter. It was so high. I think it just said high.
Yep.
So I was at work at that time, up about 45 minutes away from where we lived in Columbia. And my wife called me and said, "Hey, I'm in the hospital. Dalyce has diabetes." I had heard the term, had no idea what it really meant. And so I'm at work and I was like, oh my God. And I told my boss, "Hey, I've got to leave. My daughter's in the hospital. Something's going on." And that 45-minute drive took me about 20 minutes. I mean, I was barreling down I-95. And I got to the hospital. Let's see, you went to St. Agnes in Baltimore. And we met there, and it became this, you've heard the expression drinking from a fire hose. That's exactly what it was like. The information that it was just pummeling us. The nurses, the doctors, eventually the endocrinologist who was called in. just like information. And we're in shock from hearing the diagnosis. And now they're trying to educate us, and our heads were just not on straight. So it was shock. I got on the phone and started calling members of my family just to give them a heads up. And I'm like breaking down, crying on the phone. And I'm like, look, I can't talk right now. I'm calling back.
Yeah.
So,
did you know anybody living with diabetes at that point?
No, I did not. So I'm 60 now, and growing up as a kid, all I ever heard was, "Oh, your uncle's got the sugar. His sugar's bad." And so when I, as a grown man, hearing the term diabetes, all I knew was it had to do with sugar, nothing else. And so it was real education for all of us.
And I was in the hospital for like
3 days, I think.
Was it 3?
3 or 4 days.
In my head, I remember like a week. I just remember living in the hospital.
You're right. It was about a week.
It was a week, yeah.
They didn't want to let her leave the hospital until they had given us enough education to be able to take her home and keep her safe. So really it wasn't about her. It was about, okay, support. You've got to get ramped up on this new thing that's now the rest of your life.
The interesting thing is, even though they kind of blitz you with all this education, you can never be prepared. Like, far as from a caregiver perspective, and then also from the person that lives with the diabetes, because from day to day, things change so frequently that literally you could be running low, and then 20 minutes later, you could like literally be running high. So. Yeah, my hat goes off to you, Howard, for, one, getting up to the hospital in 20 minutes, but two, there's a lot that goes along with this disease. And, this is a reason for this particular podcast is because I don't think a lot of people understand from a caregiver's perspective how much goes into it, especially when you have a young child, because essentially your daughter has it, Dalyce has type 1 diabetes, but you're the one that has to kind of upkeep it and make sure she's fine. And you don't necessarily know how she's feeling only based off of her actions or reactions to things. So it can be very, very difficult.
That's not I don't think that's talked about quite as much. What it was like to communicate with your young daughter at that point, how she was feeling, which is what all parents have to go through, 3, 4, 5-year-old children, and imagine the kids that are diagnosed when they can't speak, what it was like communicating with your young daughter about how she felt versus what you were seeing. Did you ever have conversations with her where you were like, no, thanks for educating, I didn't look at it like that. Or was it more so that, that you were just observing, or were you hearing from your daughter, Dalyce, what it was that was going on with her? Was it more of an observation or conversation?
Yeah, it was probably more observation. In retrospect, it's good that you brought that up, because in retrospect, my wife and I once we started getting our minds and our hands around this thing, it was like, this is our thing to manage and control. And now now as an adult, I deal with Dalyce more on okay, tell me how you're feeling. Tell me, when you say low, what does that feel like? When you say high, what does that feel like? I don't think we were doing that as when she was 7. It was more of, okay, we're in charge of this. We're dealing with it. Prick her fingers, see what the number is. Okay, is she out of whack? Do we need to feed or give more insulin? So in hindsight, if I were to, like, say, for example, I have 2 grandchildren now. If one of them, God forbid, were to develop this, I would be more engaged with asking them, how do you feel right now, and things of that nature. But
yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I think parents need to hear that from you. That's exactly what, we were looking for. So it sounds like it was very cut and dry. You're managing it. We test at this time. We give this amount of insulin for this. This is what we do. A little bit, something that's a little bit less cut and dry is emotions. And it sounds like just from our conversation just before starting the podcast, that you had an overwhelming amount of guilt associated in those first couple of months of her diagnosis. What was that like, coinciding with now having to manage it, right? So now you're in charge, but you're also having this emotion of like, why did this happen? Right.
Right. Absolutely. There was a ton of guilt that I went through. I think my wife dealt with it a lot better than I did. But I think I am a more sensitive spirit. And so I just went through a tremendous amount of guilt. Why didn't I protect my child, my little girl, my only girl? Why didn't I protect her from this? How could I have not protected her from this? And, through going through therapy and support groups, the support groups were a godsend. I came to realize there was absolutely nothing I could have done. Whether it ran in my family or not, it didn't matter. I had absolutely no control over this. This is the body doing what the body does. And, it's just a roll of the dice, and Dalyce, came up with that number. And so we had to deal with it. But yeah, I went through depression for, it was probably about 6 months. I was working out regularly at home, had a little gym set up in the basement, stopped working out. I just, started gaining weight. My head just, I was dealing with managing her condition, but as far as taking care of me, that just fell by the wayside. And it was, like I said, the support groups, folks were saying you really should connect with the community of other parents who are going through it. And once I started going through it, and just like regular recovery groups, you see, hey, I'm not alone. And that made all the difference in my life experience. Once I saw, hey, this wasn't just us, other folks go through this. I saw how they were managing it. They were at different, time frames on the continuum. And I knew, okay, I'll get through this. We'll get through this. I think in the back of my head, I don't know that I ever articulated this to you, but I think in the back of my head, I was always afraid she was going to die. This was going to take her out, and I wasn't going to get to grow. She wasn't going to get to grow up and be with us. Mm-hmm. So that was always my fear. Yeah. I'll just finish this touchy-feely part by saying that I was seeing a therapist for a number of years. And when I described for her what my daughter having this condition, and I explained for her what a week in the life was like, when I was done talking, she said to me, wow, I didn't realize this is something you never put down. You always carry this. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. From the minute my eyes open in the morning until, they close at night, it's, okay, is Dalyce okay? Can I hear her in the room snoring? She was a hellacious snorer. Oops, sorry.
We getting all the good stuff from Howard today. Yeah. No, it's so interesting.
That's why kids don't like having their parents around.
I know. Well, and I would present this to Dalyce and say, how does it make you feel hearing that? Right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard that from your father before. Like, how does that make you feel?
Well, thank you for telling me that. Yeah, it's hard to carry that heaviness of worry for someone. I've never been a parent, and so I can only imagine, like, I know I worry for myself, and I know I worry for other family members, but it's like the next level when it's like life or death like that. And it's like over the years, you know, as I've gotten older and lived abroad, and there's been some things that my parents haven't seen or experienced with me, like I know that this can be life or death. And so like, you know, it's hard to hear because you don't want anyone to worry about you that way. But I know that it's coming from like love. Just that day that I was diagnosed, like we were diagnosed as like a family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like,
that's a perfect way to put it. We collectively, the four of us, and even our extended family, grandmothers, grandfathers. I mean, it was a community diagnosis. That was perfect way to put that.
So I have a few things because I was just soaking up a lot of stuff. So Howard, I know you mentioned, you know, you feeling that guilt. That's something that my mother had dealt with, and it's something that I hear common with a lot of parents because we look at it. You know, I don't have children, but people that do that I know, like their children are their everything. So when they're not able to pick up on certain things, something like diabetes, which is like it's no easy way to understand it. So many different symptoms, you know, at different ages and different stages. So I understand far as the guilt, but I'm glad you were able to find that support group where you were able to talk to other individuals because it's always like that, right? Whether it's AA or whether it's something chronic illness, having others around you to talk about and associate those things that you're currently going through with those raw emotions, it just takes so much stress off of you, you know, like talking to a therapist or whatever it is that you do to kind of vent or let those things out or talk about them or, you know, just to open up, you know, it can make things go a lot better than what maybe they currently were or at that time, that current time. But the other thing I wanted to chime in on, far as the support groups, how were they for you? I guess for you yourself, you said that they were good, but did you ever intertwine like the other parents or individuals, family members and like the kids, the component? Because I know sometimes with some of the support groups, they're able to meet other diabetics, you know, so like Dalyce was potentially had the opportunity to meet other diabetics, you know, from you being able to seek support through other parents. Like was she able to meet other diabetics through that process? Or
I don't remember. So yeah, please.
So I remember going to a couple of these like support groups for like parents and families and individuals living with diabetes. And I remember maybe they were at like Barnes and Noble. They were at like a bookstore or something. Right. And like, yeah, like my mom and I came and like everyone's like sitting in a circle. And to be honest, I personally didn't want to be there. I was very just kind of happy not being there. And I remember seeing other people's kids around, but because it was kind of like we were in a bookstore and it was adults really kind of like taking the reign, I remember not actually engaging with any of the other people who had diabetes. Like I was just like sitting next to my mom, just like being quiet, like little kid, like, you know. And so for me, it wasn't helpful for me at that time. As I got older, my support was diabetes camp. And that's when I met other people living with diabetes, became really good friends with them, and had that experience of like out of the camp setting, going to their houses, going to their birthday parties, going to their homecomings and stuff like that. Like that was cool for me. I can't really talk much.
I got to stop you because I always do this. What camp was it? I have to know that. We got to give a shout out.
My camp was Lions Camp Merrick in Nanjemoy, Maryland. Woo-hoo, Lions Camp Merrick. I think they're still open. I'm not sure what the situation with COVID is, but I used to work there for 3 years as well. Over the summers. It was a great experience. Yeah.
Okay. And now I told you I was kind of loaded. I was sitting back, observing, catching everything. Howard, you mentioned something in regards to the grandmother receiving the news far as Dalyce having type 1 diabetes. How was that received?
The family members?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was supportive.
Were they supportive? Like, did they ask questions and check in on you? And like,
I seem to recall they did. So where we were living at the time, the only family that was nearby was one of Dalyce's grandmothers.
Okay.
My wife's mom. My mom lived in. No, I'm sorry. My mom had passed
away.
Yeah,
my
so
mom
mom
just
had.
grandma.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, folks were supportive as as much as they could be, and we were honestly just in our own bubble. It was like, okay, got to deal with this, got to deal with carb. Initially, we were doing carb counting, which, oh God, get you on a pump right out the gate.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Screw that carb counting. That's, man. And I'm good with numbers too.
Yeah.
But that just like, it was just too subjective for me. Whereas the pump made things, when we moved to Dalyce to the pump, that was like a game changer for all of us. For all of us, it really was. So I was so blessed and grateful when insurance approved us for it. We got it. We had to kick out a bunch of money in order as a co-payment and whatnot, but it was well worth it.
Definitely. Probably kind of gearing away from those shots and having to give her shots as a young child. And, I mean, and me and Matt always go back and forth about this. At the end of the day, it's just, as far as the method of, for your treatment, whether it's shots, whether it's insulin pumps. I think one thing that we stand on is like having a CGM, and I'm not sure if you probably had that much experience with Dalyce with the CGM aspect of things, but that's one thing we're really big on. We think when you leave the hospital, if you want an insulin pump, you should be able to get one. But the CGM, that without a doubt, there should be no ifs, ands, or buts or questions about you leaving that hospital with the CGM, because it is a tremendous help, not just for the individual living with diabetes, but the caregiver as well. Yeah.
Amen on that.
Yeah.
Amen on that. I didn't come into the CGM fold until
with the Medtronic. Remember, I tried it and I hated it. They had like that
the soft sensor.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I tried. I didn't last very long.
This was before you went to college, right?
That
Yeah. So it's like it didn't. Dalyce was an athlete in high school, from track to wrestling, lacrosse, soccer, swimming. I mean, you name it. And so keeping a sight in was just very difficult. But once you were less active, it seems like the CGM kind of became. I remember when you went over to Ireland, things were better with those. The problem is they're just so damn expensive.
Yeah. That's a really good point, though, Howard, you brought up, because there's these two sides of the spectrum, right? One is that from a caregiver's perspective, the parent wants to make it not just easy for them as a caregiver, but also easy for the patient, the child, to live with diabetes. So putting a medical device on them is like, let's do that, right? That's going to make things easier, even if it costs a little bit of money. The other side of that is making sure that the child still lives the life that a child should live. You want to play sports, you want to get in the water, you want to do all these things. Like, you don't want to remove that element of fun and exercise activity from the child's life. You want them to remain doing those things, which I think a lot of parents maybe have trouble with, because it's like, what happens now, right? The kid has diabetes. What do we do now?
Matt, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that became like an operating philosophy for me. My wife wasn't quite on board with it, but in my mind, I kept advocating, saying that, when Dalyce said, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to go here, I want to play on this thing or do this sleepover," in my mind, I'm like, okay, she's living with this thing that, as I understood it, was going to be the rest of her life. So I wanted her to have as normal experience as possible. So if Dalyce wanted to go on a trip or something like that, I wanted her to have that experience. I was deathly afraid, because like I said, she was in our bubble. And so we were the caregivers. And so if there was a class trip or something like that, it's like, okay, she's going to leave our bubble. I mean, there were times when I forget what grade this was, but you went on this bus trip to New York was it to see
it was a Broadway show.
The Wizard of Oz or something, whatever it was. She wanted to go, and we're like, okay. And the school was like hemming and hawing, saying, well, we can't have a nurse go on that trip. So if she's going to go, you guys are going to have to go too. And so we're like, all right. So school bus up 95, parents up 95 right behind her. And
wow.
it was, I just wanted her to live her life, but it took me a minute to get there. But once I got there, that kind of informed every decision I made. It's like, I don't know, you know how when parents are, like if they've got a kid and say a parent is afraid of dogs or something like that, and they infuse their fear on their child. And I know that happens. So I was like, I don't want her to be afraid to live her life. So she wanted to join a sport, go for it. She wanted to go on a trip, sleep over, go for it. The one thing I remember was she studied French in school, and there was an opportunity to go on a trip to France. And, you know, my ex and I talked about it, and we just could not get to a place of comfort to let her go across the ocean and totally be on her own, because you can't really rely on others to, you know, they say they're going to do, but you can't really count on that. Like you can count on yourself. So that was the one time it was like, sorry, we just can't let that happen.
There's no compromising on
That's
that.
totally understandable too. Like I mean,
that's not up the street.
Sorry, Dalyce. I know.
It's fine. I went to Paris twice after the fact.
All right,
I lived abroad. It's all good. I got my experience.
See, but
yeah. So when she wanted to live abroad, do a semester abroad in Belfast, Northern Ireland, you know, I told her, I was like, look, I don't have any problem with you doing it. I'll be scared, of course, but I need you to take the initiative, make this happen. If you make it happen, we'll sign off on it. And she did. And so we did. And so she, you know, we were afraid, but
look,
at some point,
I'm gonna tell you like this, Howard. You're an awesome dad. That's all I can say. You know because you know a lot of parents, they're so worried. Yeah, minus the trip. Okay, minus the trip across the globe. But you know, I think a lot of parents are scared, which they should be, to let their child go into uncharted territory, especially when they're the ones that are helping manage this disease, this thing we call diabetes. But I like early on, you were like, I want her to be a normal child, whatever air quotes, because normal, everybody has their own definition of normal. But you wanted her to still be able to do those things that other kids were doing, whether it was sports, whether it was traveling, you know, those type of things. And I'm glad that you actually said that, because now for anybody that's listening, they have to understand that you can keep them in a bubble, but eventually they're going to pop the bubble and they have to go outside of it. So you might as well get familiar with it at an earlier age. So then that way, you know, as they get older, they mature more, they understand the disease, they can take care of it. But if you keep them away from things, now it's going to be that parent's going to have to answer to that why later. Well, why wasn't I able to do this and do that? Because living with diabetes, we can do whatever we want. We live with it. It doesn't define who we are or what we're capable of doing.
Shout out.
Yeah, that's
chasing the bus up
excellent
95.
point. And can I pick up on something you said, the M word, mature? I feel that Dalyce matured a lot faster as a result of having to deal with this condition. And so because she wasn't fighting us. She was taking it seriously. She was doing all of the right things to stay alive and be a good person and whatnot. That helped us hand over, relinquish more and more control as time went on. It's like, okay, she knows to check her numbers. She is doing all of the right things. And so that helped us from us, okay, time for you to take your shot, time for you to do this, to, okay, let's start letting you be in the driver's seat now, and we'll be in the passenger seat, ready to, grab the wheel if we have to. But
maybe I was thinking, hearing you say that, I was like, maybe it's revisionist history, but I do remember actually coming to you and Mom and being like, I want to give myself the shots now. I want to be writing the numbers in. Like, I want to, because I felt like it was maybe a couple of weeks out of the hospital that y'all were helping give the shots and helping with all that stuff. And then, I'm a fire sign. It showed when I was a younger kid. I was like, I don't want to be told what to do. I want full autonomy. So I do remember there being a point early on in, like, after the diagnosis, being like, I will do this. And kind of taking that on, and even going to prescriptions. I remember you were kind of like my prescription guy, like on that, like kind of calling, doing the refills and all that stuff. And I forgot when it was when we were in Colombia. I remember just being like, I haven't done this yet, and I don't know how to do this. So I was like, I want to take on the prescriptions. And then shortly after that, I went away to university, and I'm glad I did that, because like y'all wouldn't have been, like I couldn't depend on you guys to be there in Pittsburgh with me doing all that stuff. So just kind of, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, I guess, like just advice on living with diabetes and the caretakers and stuff like that. I think even throwing that out there, like, would you like to have more like of the response? Would you prefer to do this instead of kind of checking in to see how the caring relationship goes as well?
It's good to hear. I'll file it away.
Right. It's like giving, from a caretaker's perspective, giving up, like you said, relinquishing some of that responsibility versus the patient and the child saying, give it, I want it. I want to do it. It's like, where's the push and pull? We actually spoke, another woman we spoke with, Alexis Newman, when she came back from diabetes camp,
she started taking shots. She
started taking her own shots.
Yeah.
Right. And she was diagnosed very young, just like Dalyce. So something to be said about strong women doing that, I guess, that the men are like, keep giving me shots until I'm older. But the more women we speak with and the more we hear that, we understand where that needs to be brought up to more caregivers now that have young children, right? Where you can see that split. It's going to be mostly your responsibility in the beginning. But after a certain point, that child, like Brand said, they're going to pop that bubble. They're going to leave the nest. Right, you have to give that responsibility up, and that's a really big part of it. What we've talked a lot about positives. What would you say in terms of challenges? What was the biggest challenge? And you spoke a little bit about the depression and grief, but throughout the years, was there something that kept coming up as like a challenge? Was like every time this came up, something. It was a challenge, or maybe from Dalyce's standpoint. Yeah, sounds like there is. Yeah.
Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And it kind of nicely dovetails into what she just shared. So the thing that frustrated me was when we did kind of relinquish it to Dalyce as she got, for me, 7 was just too young to say, okay, you kind of take this over, doing shots and all that. But as we did start to relinquish that over, a couple of years, I guess it was, Dalyce it would just always happen. We'd be on a drive somewhere, going on a trip, and she'd be like in the back seat, oh, I'm out of strips. And I just
oh man,
drove me effing crazy. I can I can't. I stopped counting how many times that happened on trips, and so and
That's hysterical.
there was that. I mean, we typically dealt with ordering the insulin, so we typically didn't run out of that. But yeah, man, those strips. That was.
I actually thought you were gonna say she said that she forgot the insulin, so I can take the strips. I can take the strips.
But I mean, before the world of CGMs,
yeah, true.
That's like you were operating off of that number. So
you need it.
If you didn't know what the number was and you felt okay, right, and you might be 300 and be like, no, I'm fine, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's way to go, Dalyce.
I forgot about that.
But that's really interesting.
Revisionist history, huh?
Yeah. See, right? Put it back.
I guess we
on.
all have a little of that.
Nah, 2 points for Howard. I would say though that's really interesting because that's something that's kind of like middle ground, because you want the child or the patient to be upfront and honest and be like, hey, you know what? I'm actually running out of this. Whereas most of the responsibility already being on the caretaker's side, it's like, oh, how did you not know that? And then it comes up and you're in the back seat like, I'm out of these. Luckily, hopefully, it's the type of thing that most people can get at a drugstore over the counter, but you want insurance to pay for them, right? So that's the big, for 50 test strips, it's like $50.
Yeah, back in the day, man, the test strips were a lot. Like they're super cheap now, but then, I mean, they're not cheap, but like back then, they were a lot. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, we go on a trip and it's like, okay, you get there and to the pharmacy, like you said, and you get it over the counter. But I remember plopping down over $100, for strips. And here we are going on a trip. Okay, let's just take away money that we had.
Yeah. Way to go, Downs. That's funny. I went on a trip to New York once, and I forgot needles. So I walked into my coach's room at like 10:30 before everyone was going to bed, and I was like, "Hey, coach, we need to go to the pharmacy. I forgot my needles." Like, I'd never seen an adult male get so mad that, because like,
I mean, he was kicked back in his boxes,
he was
like,
in his bed. He was laying down already. I was like, "Coach, we got to go get needles like right now." But that's the type of thing where like it until it really happens to you and you're in that situation, it's only a thought. And then once it happens, it's like panic. And that's to your point, Howard, about a child or a young adult going away, going overseas. It's a situation until it really happens, and then it's in panic mode where it's like, oh my God, I need to do this right now. So
I have a vignette if you want to hear it about panic mode.
Please.
And, you don't know it until it happens. So, obviously, I don't know if your audience knows about treating severe lows where the person is kind of unconscious, so you can't really put something in their mouth to consume, otherwise they'll choke. So they have this product, glucagon, that you administer by shot to, to release the glycogen from your liver or something like that to bring you back. So there was one day, Dalyce was an adult at this point. We were still in Columbia. I just happened to take the day off because I had been working this long stretch of days, and my boss was like, "Don't come into work tomorrow. Just take off." And so Dalyce and I were home alone watching TV. She's lying down on the floor, and I noticed that I heard her like making some noises, and I'm like, "Dalyce, what are you doing?" I'm thinking she's just being silly. And next thing I know, she like seizes and her like foot hits the drywall and breaks the drywall. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then it like, okay, now I'm paying attention. And I realize, oh my God, she's low. And so like I go to her and like her eyes are rolled back and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, I know what to do. I went and I got the glucagon and I panicked. I took the needle out, put it in the bottle, I took the needle out, went to put it in the bottle, didn't take the plastic cap off, and the needle went boing.
Oh.
And I'm like trying to straighten. I'm like, no, this isn't gonna work. And at that point, I knew that my control of this was gone. And so I just picked up the phone and I'm like, okay, got to call 911. And I called 911 and I'm on the phone with them and I'm like, okay, my daughter's having a seizure. She's diabetic. She must be really low because she's flopping around on the floor. I've got glucagon, but I can't administer it. And they're like, okay, we've got folks coming. They're like, just stay on the line and, stay with her so she doesn't hurt herself. Keep her on her side, all of this stuff. The woman was wonderful. And I think she even said, you might want to go unlock your door. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go unlock the door and just kind of leave it open and so that they can come in. And so like, I just got on the floor and I was just like holding her and she was like all clammy and whatnot. And she wasn't conscious, but I just felt like I needed to reassure her. So I'm like, okay, Dalyce, I'm here. I've got you. You're not going anywhere. This will be okay. I've got you. And eyes rolling, like I said, in the back of her head. When the paramedics came, I hollered, I was like, yeah, come on up here. And they came up. And so I'm telling them what happened. And they're like, okay, we've got it. And as soon as like I stood up and walked away, I just lost my shit. Sorry. I lost my stuff, man.
Yeah.
I started bawling and I just, I guess it was the adrenaline coming down from the adrenaline, but I lost it. I called my ex while I was waiting for the paramedics to come. She came home. And so, we're both just kind of watching them do their thing. And as soon as I heard Dalyce say, what's going on, I knew everything was right. Everything was good. She's back.
So you don't remember that, Dalyce?
I do. That's after I rode my bike from Pittsburgh.
Oh, is that
Maryland.
when that was?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I just decided to ride my bicycle home and went very low afterwards and had that seizure. And I do remember just being like wet, cold, clammy, waking up to paramedics over me. And this is not the first time that's happened. So it's just it's horrifying every time it happens. But when it happens, you're just like, okay, this was a low, you kind of get recentered into self or whatever. But it was hard because then I also came to and my parents were upset, and you're just like, oh, bless, I'm so sorry, and it doesn't feel nice to have to bring fear and worry into people like that, so then it's even as the patient or the person living with diabetes, you have the guilt of that as well,
Yeah, Howard, I think you hit it on the head. No matter how prepared, any circumstance or situation, you can be as prepared as anybody. But when those real time, we call them. When I used to play football, game time situations, we call it when the bullets get to flying on the field because it's way different than practice. We can prep. We know where everything is. We know where the glucagon is. We know how to administer it. But in those crunch time, game time situations, things can go left fast. So I'm glad that you were able to, to call 911, still stay calm and panicked. Not panicked, even though you probably inside you were, but you were calm enough to get it taken care of, because some people could literally freak out in a situation like that, and it could have ended up a lot worse than what it was. So I'm glad that you were able to navigate through that, and then Dalyce, that you're still here, because those are serious situations, they're serious situations.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're really frightening to have someone that you care the world about, that you would die for, in some sort of physical harm or something like that. And it's just, man, the panic it's just, it's just by the grace of God that I didn't lose my stuff and not do the right thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
You handled it.
I think it's such a stark difference as well. living with diabetes and your behavior, your demeanor when you're in range or when you have control of, your senses, and when people, whether that's family or friends that I've had, significant others that I've dated or whatever, have seen like that other side, like where the whites of the eyes are out and you're just kind of like dunzo, like you are completely vulnerable and like need someone else's help. Like, it's intense, and it's hard for me because I'm living it, but I don't know if I've been in many of those situations where I've had to be the caretaker for others in that situation, so.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, I think while we wrap up this conversation, which has been so educational for us to understand, well, now we know a little bit more about Dalyce, but Howard, again, thank you for all of you've shared. What type of advice, right? If you're going to give advice to others in your position, right, Howard, to caregivers, and Dalyce is somebody who was raised by caregivers living with diabetes, like what advice would you give?
So right off the top of my head, the first thing I would say is plug into support, whether it's a support group or for families with somebody that has diabetes in it, or whether it's a therapist. Plug into that immediately. We did not do that, and we were just kind of dealing with it on our own in our bubble. And like I said, when we started the support group, it made the world of difference to my emotional well-being. So I would say plug into that immediately. Also, the thing, Brandon, that you picked up on was, check in with the patient. Hey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? What is this? I don't know that as a child I ever asked you, Dalyce, how do you feel about this, that you have this? I don't know that we ever had that conversation. I know we have as a teenager or an adult, but as a child, I had the typical parent mindset of I'm the adult, you are the child, and that road goes nowhere.
And we know, I know all about that road. So I'm gonna ask you, Dalyce, then, as being a type 1 diabetic and having someone care for you growing up, is there anything that you would want somebody to know, or even just to be able to like communicate to a caregiver or a parent or a grandmother, school nurse, teacher, coach? Is there any piece of advice that you would like to supply?
Absolutely. Even from a young age, definitely more so now into adulthood, like communication is so important to me. And like, I'm an emotional person, I'm an empath. So like, I feel like it would be really helpful if people who find themselves on this journey, checking in with everybody. Like, even if you're living with diabetes, like I didn't check in with y'all, I don't think either, like to be like, Mom, Dad, Chad, my brother, like how are we doing, so I guess the advice that I would have is to be open and like eager, I think, to communicate and check in with like the emotional aspect of that, and also asking for help when needed. I think sometimes I would ask for help when it was like to the point of like one test strip left, like half a bottle of like insulin left, like, so even that, from those kind of examples, like it kind of manifested into other things as well. So it's like not waiting until the last minute to ask for help and support with like living with diabetes. Yeah.
I thought of one other thing, if we've got time.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned Dalyce has a brother, Chad, who is like 18 months older. And when Chad was, so you were 7, he was 9. One of the things that in retrospect over the years that I felt in my head that I wasn't doing well as a parent was giving him the care and attention that he needed. I felt like our collective family energy was, spotlight was on Dalyce. And so I've had conversations with my son, since probably his late well, probably more when he was in his 20s. And I just opened up and shared with him that, you know, Chad, I feel like I don't know if you feel this way or not, but I feel the conditions may have been right for you to feel that you were left out. You were third wheel in our unit. And, you know, and I just asked him, I said, did you ever feel that way? And he told me, no, he didn't. But to this day, I still, that's a regret that I have, that I didn't, you know, that we weren't, I mean, we were a unit. We had some great moments together, but all of our attention was on Dalyce and managing diabetes. You know, where we'd go to eat, what we would do, you know, what we had to do to prep for trips. And so I'm an only child. And so I can only imagine if I had a sibling and all of the spotlight in our household was focused on my sibling, I think I would have felt left out. So, I mean, he says he didn't, but I can't help but feel that he did.
Look, I'll be honest. I see the dynamic between you two, and I've heard Dalyce talk nothing but great things about you. I'm sure you were just as an impact as you've been on Dalyce on Chad. And I don't even know. I don't know him, but I can assure that. So if he's saying that it didn't affect him, it probably didn't. But I do appreciate you bringing that up, because that is a huge topic. You know,
it's very common
with families that have more than just one child. Yeah. You know, you have to think, you have to devote that time, and it's tough to kind of spread that out, you know, amongst, you know, other children, not just one. If you have two, if you have three, like that, it's a difficult task. It's not easy. So I know you said you regret it. You did the best that you could under those circumstances. You know what I mean? So don't take it to heart, because you've come a long way. And like I said, he didn't say that it affected him. So you just got to roll with that, man. You just got to roll with that.
Yeah. And it really is such a common, and just to, like, again, kudos for what you've shared. And it sounds like you were a wonderful parent and parental unit there for Dalyce as she grew up. But that is such a common feeling amongst caregivers who have multiple children, one living with diabetes, is that after a certain point, sometimes it gets to be too late in the game for them to realize that they weren't associating time appropriately or splitting time appropriately, or the attention. So we can't thank the both of you enough for what you've shared today, maybe what you've learned about each other there, it sounded like earlier in the call. So I'm super happy that we were able to bring that out of you. And thank you. Again, I do want to let Dalyce throw out her business information right now so that we'll catch up with you individually. But shout out to Dalyce for starting her own business, photography wise. Tell us where we can find you, Dalyce.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us. So yeah, my photography work can be found on Instagram at black_bird_photo. And my website is www.blackbird-vegan.com. And yeah, that's where you can find me and see all my pictures with diabetes, travel, veganism, all that stuff.
And look, Howard, we're not going to leave you out. If you have handles, Instagram handles, Facebook handles, website handles.
Where you at?
Look, where you at? Look, where you at, man? I heard you do photography too. So, hey, if you got some stuff out there we need to check out, you know, let us know.
Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. And for this opportunity, man. This is awesome. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, because this is, you know, the word needs to get out to folks, you know, that, you know, this is just a part of life, man. Yes. This is, you know, diabetes is, you know, just like some people have migraines, some people have lupus. Diabetes is just a thing, and you can live a normal life. You know, you really can. Look at you guys. Yeah. I mean, all the three of you, you know, you live in a normal life. Definitely. So thank you for what you're doing. But to get back, my photography, I'm mainly landscapes, is www.howardwilsonphotography.com. And I am breaking into headshots, so I've got some headshots on there as well.
Okay.
You got a great teacher over there, so make sure she takes you to school.
Anyone out there on the East Coast, check out Howard's photography. If you're on the West Coast in the Los Angeles or San Diego area, check out Dalyce's photography. She's bi-coastal. She goes back and forth. I know she's doing some business out there right now. So again, thank you from Brandon and myself and Bolus Maximus and what we've been doing here. This is an impactful conversation for sure, and it's going to help some individuals as they move forward as a caretaker or as a potential caretaker of children with diabetes. So thank you. Yeah, that's it. We'll talk again to you soon. Thanks for your time today, and as always,
keep it 100.
Take care.
If you don't know, now you know. Bolus Maximus is not sponsored by anybody, but if you would like to get involved or sponsor a podcast,
please reach out to us at thebolusmaximus@gmail.com. That is thebolusmaximus@gmail, or through our website, bolusm.org. That is www.bolusm.org. We also have an Instagram, Facebook, and a YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out.